My father used to fix helicopters. He can make them fly. I like thinking of this fact, and I start to believe it's in my blood, this ability to make things take flight. What did you want to be when you grew up?
My first job aspiration was probably to be a teacher.
I want to grow up to be an actor.
I wanted to be a magician.
I think the first thing I wanted to be was an archaeologist.
I came out of high school wanting to be an aerospace engineer.
I wanted to be Superman, of course.
I want to be a meteorologist when I grow up.
I wanted to be an astronaut. My father did too. From the moment his grandfather pulled him out of the house to show him Sputnik arcing across the early morning sky, Chuck Rhodes was in love with space.
When I was young, I wanted to be an astronaut when I grew up. I don't know why, but I've always been fascinated with space and space travel. And it's hard to say if Star Trek caused it, but one of my earliest memories was back in the 60s when the show was initially on, Spock in the cave mind melding with the Horta. And so I don't know, I was like always fascinated by, I loved Star Trek when I was a kid, and I guess the idea of space travel was always interesting to me after that.
I used to have this persistent experience of walking down the street singing the way children do sometimes, and I imagined that people were listening to me, and it was like part of my psychological equipment that somebody was listening, that I was performing. I was walking down the street alone, but I had the sensation of performing. I don't know if it's some kind of genetic anomaly that some of us have or what.
I really got into King Tut and that whole story of ancient Egypt and just hieroglyphs, and it gets you Cleopatra and Anthony. It's romance. It's good. I like that era.
I had the desires of most kids. I want to be a fireman, want to be a astronaut. And I remember though going with my babysitter to like one of the premiere nights. I remember going to the club before going to the movie got to meet Omar Sharif, and my babysitter flipped out. She was just beside herself when we went to see the movie. We saw him up on the screen later on, and I kind of put it together. Oh, if she really adores him so much, and I wanted her attention too. I like my babysitter. I want to grow up to be an actor.
My dad continued dreaming of space. He was able to watch the moon landing during one of his tours in Vietnam.
I was on guard duty. I remember sitting in that bunker. There was three of us. We were sitting there looking up at the moon. There were men up there. Somebody had a little miniature TV they'd gotten, an AFVN, Armed Forces Network, patched the feed through so we could see this guy's TV was so bad. I mean, we had tin foil and bits of metal tied to it. And we went into his room. We were watching this black and white, fuzzy black and white picture of them bouncing around on the moon. It was something. It was amazing. I thought for sure I'd be able to take a vacation on the moon, or if not in orbit, by now. I will have gone a couple of times.
I was a kid in the 60s. I was growing up in the 60s, and so that was when the space program and the space race was like at its height. Sputnik was shortly before I was born, and the moon landing was 69, so I'm basically right between that period where they were sending up guys in capsules all the time. My next door neighbor was a woman named Nettie Gomes, and she was a really nice lady, and I used to go over to her house all the time and visit her, and she'd give me candy and all that kind of stuff. And they had the live pictures in black and white on on TV. And they showed the astronauts on the moon, and I remember walking out into my driveway that day and seeing Nettie Gomes at her kitchen window, and when she saw me, she made a face like this. And that's something that you don't see adults do, looking that excited very often. So I knew it was a big deal, and so it sort of burned in my brain. Nettie Gomes, she was so excited, and she said, "Isn't it great? Isn't it great?"
My dad stayed true to aeronautics. At the age of 11, and just after the passing of his grandfather, he took a job sweeping out the hangar at the Cleveland airport. He met a flight surgeon there who told him that because of his imperfect vision, he would never be an astronaut. The idea of wanting to be an astronaut, and when you realized that because of the
Coke bottles?
the Coke bottles, that wasn't going to happen.
That was awful. That was the worst moment of my life. And we were talking, and he says, "Were you going to be a mechanic?" And they always ask you, "What are you going to be when you grow up?" kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Oh no, I want to be a pilot. No bad news. Not in the military. You're not. This is because of glasses. And I went into a graveyard spin at that point, and just crushed. No feeling to describe in the world.
Growing up, his obsession with space had also ignited a love affair with film and science fiction. He and his friends made movies together. They built elaborate sets for productions that would take them into outer space.
I was serious enough to talk to the Air Force recruiter in my high school, because at the time, the only path to being an astronaut was to go into the Air Force first, go into the military and be a pilot. So I looked into it, and I talked to the Air Force recruiter, and he was happy to talk to me. But what turned out was that I have really bad eyesight, like really, really bad eyesight. You should see how thick these are. So there was no chance of me ever being a pilot. I could have joined the Air Force, but I never would have flown a plane.
My brother had a rather straight course. He became a mathematician. He's a professor of topology. My sister became a computer programmer, worked for a big company. And me, in the middle, I did the thing that a lot of middle children do, which was just go into the blue horizon,
After Vietnam, my dad married my darling mother Donna and started a family. He continued to study and write, everything from films and tech manuals to sci-fi novels and screenplays. He filled his home with the trappings of his passion for aeronautics, although the focus of his life was changing. Do you see any potential problems with becoming a meteorologist? Like if it doesn't...
Yeah, one of the problems would be, I think, paying for college.
Paying for college?
Would be the toughest thing, I would think, because it's so much money these days.
My loan money ran out. I didn't have any money, and I had to commute to Marin for 40-hour plus work days, and so I was essentially lost my apartment, so I was living out of my car for 2 months, transporting back up and forth Marin. Sometimes I'd sleep in Marin in my car and then go and use the hospital facilities to clean up before I put my scrubs on.
My parents took out a loan, and I took out a loan, and made it happen, and I'm going to be paying it back for the next 10 years. So it wasn't really an obstacle. It just sucked.
I applied to UCLA, and I was rejected. So I studied film at colleges up here in Sonoma County, and there's not a whole lot of job placement going on out of film school in Sonoma County. It would have probably been a much easier path for me if I had been accepted to UCLA.
I, example, had told all my friends and family I had it in the bag because this agent told me that I was the director's favorite and so on and so forth, and I wasn't really dealing in reality very well.
When I moved to LA, I decided I was going to be a rock star. But when I wasn't, the biggest rock star in the country, I was very depressed. LA has a lot of people like that had a imaginary goal, and then they didn't make it, and then they end up you know, working at a 7-Eleven or something like that.
And I think that's what I keep trying to get across to my son, who he just is very depressed about the way the world is right now, and he feels like it's not fixable and that it's just too far gone, and it's really weighing on him that he just can't seem to figure out how to make it better.
Like anybody, I spend a lot of time during the day feeling like I'm in the wrong place doing the wrong thing, and I'm just riddled with doubt.
The framework of what we once wanted to be starts to give way under the burden of real-life responsibility. Eventually, derelict dreams become heavy reminders of just how far off course we've strayed.
And he turned off the music halfway through one of my songs and said, "Is there something else you can do?"
We don't get food stamps, medical benefits, cash aid.
How it actually is compared to how I thought it would be is not, it's totally different.
My biggest obstacle was impatience.
I think growing up, one of the biggest things is I just always wanted my parents to be proud of me.
I fear that my dad lets these things get the best of him.
People get stuck in depression. People get into funks, and they don't pursue their dreams or are not honest with their feelings. And it's rough dealing with reality and truth, but ultimately it's worthwhile.
You know, there's such a variety of things happening in the world that if you put out your fishing net and keep dragging day after day after day, you're bound to find some things that are just perfect, because you know, there's stuff of every description everywhere.
You have to ask yourself, even as a child, like, would you do it for free? And if you would, then that's where you're supposed to be.
I'm really good to the people who work for me. I'm not greedy. I would just as soon have the profits go to the people who help make it as take them home in my own pocket. And that feels like a real success, and that's something that my mom and my dad are both very proud of.
I get more pleasure in memorizing lines and writing shows and performing, and I don't care if I get rich and famous.
If it's in your heart and you have to do it, then you have to do
I
it.
kind of always had this feeling when I was little that if I wanted to do it, I'll just do it. And if I don't get there, then I didn't get there. And there's always something else that will happen. That's life. It's the nature of just keep going. Nothing's impossible.
And so it's possible. I mean, Mother Teresa was one person. She didn't do anything very exciting. She just kept hanging in there and being a good person. So it's always possible.
When I'm performing sometimes, when I'm writing, I feel like I'm doing the right thing. When I'm talking to my daughter about difficulties, you know, and working things through heart to heart, I have no doubt that I'm doing just exactly the right thing.
You have to have the heart of a child and the skin of a rhino. So you just have to have that passion and that spark, you know, that's underneath the ribs that just gets you inspired to do things.
Once you have an idea that you really, really want to do, and you start on a path towards it, things fall into place.
Well, it's a flow. It's a flow. You feel, you know, just like water going from one place to another. It's just it feels natural and satisfying, and there's no room for doubt.
Carl Jung suggested that anxiety arises out of the incongruity between fantasy and reality, between who you think you should be and who you are. My dad couldn't be an astronaut in reality, but he immersed himself in dreams of space. Rather than feeling failure, he should see that those dreams enrich his life and have enabled him to accomplish so much without ever going into space. In no small way, he is living his dream. Maybe the answer is to fuse our dreams with reality, freeing ourselves to live them both in whatever way we can.